The sky over Australia's dead, silent forest suddenly fills with many strange, unexplained falling objects. Millions of them plunge downward instantly into blackened earth, yet none of them are trees. No shovels, no tired workers, no seedlings ever carried by hand across this endless wasteland. Instead, giant drones hover silently overhead, firing tiny capsules straight down into the loose soil. Each capsule slams hard into the ground with enough force to bury itself instantly there. 40,000 of these strange objects fall from a single drone alone every single day. Somewhere beneath the drifting ash, a lone koala quietly searches for a home that vanished. 3 billion animals simply died or fled the flames that swallowed this entire scorched land. So why exactly is Australia dropping millions of these things instead of planting real trees? The answer hides inside one tiny capsule that could quite realistically save an entire continent. Rewind now to late 2019, when Australia's dry bush suddenly turns into a furnace overnight. Flames stretch endlessly across 11 million hectares, an area roughly half the size of Britain. Entire mountain ranges glow bright orange, visible clearly from satellites circling far above the earth. Thick smoke chokes cities 1,000 kilometers away, turning bright daylight into a strange twilight. 7 billion trees burn down slowly to blackened skeletons across the country's entire southeast corner. When the fire finally dies out, eerie silence replaces what used to be constant birdsong. Koalas now cling desperately to scorched trunks, too weak and burned to climb any higher. Rescue workers carefully wrap burned paws in bandages, feeding exhausted animals water from small bottles. Conservationists now warn that koalas could vanish entirely from New South Wales within 3 decades. The obvious solution seems simple enough. Just quickly send people out to plant new trees. But look a little closer at the land, and that simple plan quickly falls apart. Steep cliffs, collapsed roads, and unstable fields of ash block every single possible walking path. One tired worker with a shovel can plant maybe only a few hundred trees daily. But millions of hectares desperately need seeds, and there simply isn't ever nearly enough time. Meanwhile, Australia already loses a forest the size of a football field every 86 seconds. Human hands simply cannot outrun this kind of sheer destruction moving at such terrifying speed. Somewhere quietly in Sydney, a small team of engineers watches these grim numbers in horror. They ask one radical question: what if machines could plant trees faster than fire burns? Their answer will not ever involve any saplings, shovels, or even a single human footstep. It begins with something no bigger than a coffee bean, dropped straight from the sky. This is called the seed pod, and it changes everything about how forests regrow again. Inside a busy Sydney warehouse, machines carefully mix native seeds with a mysterious brown coating. That protective coating is made from waste biomass, recycled carefully into food for the seed. Each pod becomes a tiny survival kit, specially built to outlast hungry birds and rodents. Company founder Andrew Walker proudly holds one single pod gently up to the camera, smiling. "This tiny little thing," he says warmly, "can outperform an entire manual planting crew." Behind him, a massive drone waits patiently on a launch pad, its engines humming loudly. This octocopter drone will soon become the single fastest tree planter on the entire continent. But before takeoff, the drone still needs something no shovel ever required before: a map. And that detailed map is built entirely by artificial intelligence, not any single human forester. A separate scanning drone always flies first, mapping every single loose rock, root, and slope. Onboard sensors capture a full, three-dimensional model of land no human has walked in years. Software then carefully marks safe planting zones, avoiding fallen logs, loose gravel, and open roads. An algorithm then plots the perfect flight path, calculating every single final precise drop point. Only then does the planting drone finally rise, its hopper full of thousands of pods. It flies barely 2 meters far above the scorched and uneven ground stretching out below. A mechanical arm precisely fires pods rapidly downward, 2 capsules launching out every single second. Each pod strikes the ground with exactly enough force to bury itself under the surface. No human hand ever touches the soil, yet every single seed lands precisely on target. In just a single day, one drone plants 40,000 potential future trees across land. Compare that number to a human planter's few hundred, and the gap feels truly impossible. The company still boldly claims this method runs 25 times faster than any manual planting. It also costs roughly 80% less than paying for an entire human planting crew. But raw speed means absolutely nothing if the seeds inside these pods simply never sprout. This is exactly where most viewers assume the whole clever idea is just a gimmick. So scientists carefully put every single pod through months of extensive laboratory germination testing first. Only seeds with proven, consistently high survival rates ever finally make it inside a pod. The nutrient-rich coating also gently feeds the tender seedling through its most fragile early days. Each individual pod even carries a tiny GPS chip, tagging its exact location on Earth. That means engineers can easily revisit any single pod months after it was originally dropped. Drone cameras carefully fly back over old planting sites, photographing every single sprouting green shoot. Machine learning then carefully compares thousands of new images to track survival rates over time. This obsessive, quiet monitoring is the part almost nobody ever sees in the usual headlines. Now travel south, toward a quiet wetland called Koala, near Australia's eastern mid-coast coastal region. Bushfires here completely destroyed the native swamp mahogany trees, Koala's single most important food source. Local councils quickly call in the drone company, desperate to rebuild the entire food supply. Within just days, thousands of specialized pods rain down quietly across the entire flooded wetland. WWF Australia proudly partners on the project, hoping to double the region's entire koala population. Their bigger goal? Raise $210 million for complete, eventual, full recovery. We need to respond at a scale never attempted before, their determined CEO calmly says. Elsewhere, giant drones quietly battle a completely different enemy, an invasive, stubborn olive tree species. At a botanic garden near Sydney, these weeds once covered 20% of the park. Workers already cleared the invaders, but native trees still needed to reclaim the bare hillside. University researchers closely watch drones climb a steep ridge, dropping pods across the whole slope. This isn't science fiction anymore. It's already a fully funded research trial happening right now. But skeptics still fairly raise an uncomfortable, quite important question about this entire clever method. Careful new studies show drone-dropped seeds still survive at noticeably lower rates than hand-planted seedlings. A fully grown seedling already has strong roots. A bare seed must fight for everything. So drones don't fully replace planting. They simply reach places where planting was once impossible. Think steep cliffs, flooded valleys, and fire zones far too dangerous for any human crew. In those remote places, a low-odd seed still simply beats zero trees planted at all. Researchers also keep engineering smarter pods, testing new pod shapes that bury themselves even deeper. One clever design, called the E-seed, spins gently like a maple seed as it falls. That fast spinning motion drills the seed straight into loose soil upon final landing impact. Every small improvement adds a few more precious percentage points to the overall survival odds. Meanwhile, similar drone fleets are now rising into the sky across entirely different continents too. In Canada, drones actively restore forests torn completely apart by catastrophic, recent record-breaking wildfire season. In Kenya, drones carefully plant indigenous trees across land destroyed by severe drought and erosion. The Australian company now confidently eyes South Africa, chasing exactly the same ambitious global mission. 100 million trees a year, they proudly say, restoring biodiversity right across the globe. That huge number sounds impossible until you remember 40,000 pods drop every single day. Still, some critics openly call reforestation drones a flashy distraction from real, urgent climate action. Planting trees, they firmly argue, means nothing if the underlying land eventually keeps burning again. Company scientists calmly push back, insisting monitoring and species diversity solve that very exact worry. They deliberately plant mixed native species, not fast rows of a single profitable timber tree. A healthy mixed forest resists fire and disease far better than any monoculture ever could. This is careful restoration engineered for resilience, not just a fast photo opportunity for cameras. Back at Katai wetland, drone cameras finally capture the very first new tiny green sprouts. Months after the pods first fell, life quietly pushes upward through the cracked, blackened soil. Somewhere nearby, a hidden wildlife camera catches a koala slowly moving through returning green branches. That single powerful image becomes the moment engineers say made every sleepless night worth it. But this remarkable story is bigger than one wetland or one grateful koala family. It quietly asks a much larger question about how humanity fights ecological disaster now. For decades, restoration simply meant volunteers, shovels, and inspiring but painfully slow photo days. Climate disasters today simply no longer wait patiently for human hands to catch up. Machines now move at roughly the same terrifying speed as the fires themselves do. That single shift alone might be the real revolution hiding inside this small pod. Picture the very next major wildfire season, wherever it eventually strikes across the planet. Instead of waiting years for funding and volunteers, drones could realistically launch within days. Recovery that once painfully took a decade could realistically begin within a single season. Of course, technology alone still cannot regrow an ecosystem without careful human oversight guiding it. Ecologists still carefully choose every species, every planting zone, every survival benchmark tracked closely. The drone remains only a tool, never a replacement for real scientific understanding itself. But as a tool, it reaches places human feet may never safely walk again. Picture a steep cliff face scorched completely black, totally inaccessible to any planting crew. A drone simply hovers calmly past it, dropping pods exactly where roots should grow. This single unique capability alone could unlock millions of hectares humans previously wrote off. Now zoom back out to the full global scale of forest loss every single year. Around 15 billion trees quietly disappear annually from logging, farming, and rapid urban expansion. No amount of careful manual planting has ever managed to outpace that staggering number. Drone reforestation now offers the first real mathematical chance of closing that terrifying gap. Not a guaranteed fix, but a real fighting chance humanity simply never had before. Back in Sydney, Andrew Walker quietly watches his drones lift off for another important mission. He still remembers when people once laughed at the idea of trees planted by machines. Now governments and universities eagerly queue up, requesting his fleet for their own damaged land. Investors have poured millions of dollars into pods that once seemed like pure science fiction. What began as one small Sydney startup now steadily edges toward a global movement. Somewhere over a scorched, silent valley, another swarm of drones lifts quietly into the sky. Below them, the blackened hills patiently wait for their turn to breathe green again. In roughly 18 months, satellite images will finally show canopy where there was only ash. Somewhere deep in that future forest, a koala's grandchild will finally have a real home. None of it ever began with a shovel. It began instead with a falling capsule. The paradox here is simple. Sometimes saving a forest means never once touching the ground. Australia never truly gave up on planting trees. It simply reinvented what planting actually means. And that quiet reinvention might just be the blueprint the whole planet needs next. So here's finally the real answer to the question that opened this entire video. Australia dropped millions of biotech seed pods, not saplings, into its vast burned wilderness. Each individual pod carries a seed, nutrients, protection, and a tiny GPS location tag. Drones fire them faster, far cheaper, and further than any human crew ever possibly could. It isn't a perfect solution, but it buys these burned forests desperately needed extra time. Somewhere right now, another quiet pod is falling towards soil that desperately, urgently needs it. A tiny capsule, quietly betting everything on a forest that hasn't existed in years. If this whole story surprised you, imagine how it feels watching drones do it live. Tell me honestly in the comments. Would you trust a machine to regrow a forest? Subscribe right now, because next week we uncover another invention absolutely nobody saw coming. Somewhere beneath the drifting ash right now, a brand new forest is quietly being born. No shovel touched it. No worker ever planted it. Yet life refuses to stay silent. The koalas don't know it yet, but their forest is already on its way back. Maybe the entire future of forests was never really about human hands at all. Maybe it was always simply about what we're brave enough to drop from the sky.